Another issue I want to address is, are Caucasians now going to be profiled? I mean, it's fascinating. Now that we have white perpetrators in the Boston Marathon bombing, their whiteness has become completely irrelevant. White is never used in describing the suspects. It was not addressed in any of the press conferences I saw that we have. We have a manhunt for a white individual. I didn't hear it. I think maybe there was one instance where one official mentioned it, right? I mean, white American Muslim bombers. Nobody ever thought about this possibility. Natan, nobody even considered this could be a possibility.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any mystery as to what's going on. I mean, it's the people of color are considered an other. They're labeled as such. That's how people talk about them. The sort of default standard, whether it's explicit or implicit, is that you're white and probably that you're Christian. So this is like the standard. We all know this. That's why it's reported as such.
Sikh American activist and filmmaker Valerie Kaur pointed out another example of the double standard, which actually David Sirota described quite a bit. He said, let's remember that the Oak Creek mass shooting was actually the last incident of domestic terrorism in this country. It was committed by a white supremacist who walked into a Sikh house of worship. We did not hear calls for white people to be profiled. We did not hear Christianity denigrated or Christians living in fear. The way that our country diagnoses a problem when it's a white perpetrator is that it's an individual problem. I think this is an interesting thing. I mean, there are so many other pressing issues with this case, and they're being discussed, but I think it's interesting to talk about, we have two white perpetrators here, and all of a sudden their whiteness is just not a factor.
Well, it's easy to profile a minority, right? Because there's fewer of them.
Sure.
They're the ones who stick out in a crowd. So how do you profile white people? I mean, it seems like such a huge undertaking that it wouldn't even be worth the effort on any front. Of course, I'm not saying that profiling people of other races is worth the effort, obviously.
No, but just in the context of how this has been carried out.
Right.
The other thing that's interesting is that we're also talking about them in the context of immigrants, right? And I find it interesting because one an American citizen, one close to being an American citizen. How far after you've come into this country is the fact that you came from another country a factor? I mean, let's think about me, right? I came to this country when I was 5. I became a citizen when I was 17. If I now committed an act of terror, what would be pointed at, right? What would be pointed at? Would it be, listen, this is a guy who came into this country. Clearly, our immigration system did not work well because we didn't identify him. We didn't stop him. This guy was running around our country, and then he committed this act of terror. That's another framing, I think, that is interesting, which is this is because these guys aren't from the U.S. And how far does that work? I don't know. I'm asking the question.
Well, we know how the corporate media works,
right? We do.
They would say, yes, this is clearly something that needs to be looked at. They'd say, well, let's look at the parents. Let's look at the grandparents.
Right.
Yeah.